Oh, welcome back to the Weekend Ball podcast. I said it correctly this time instead of behind the play, the other podcast that I do. Today we're going to be talking some more Canada basketball, specifically with the men's team. I'm joined here by two guys that if you follow this podcast last year and then obviously even earlier last week, we have Maddie Ireland who joins the show again, and then the one and only, the infamous X.com writer, reporter, columnist, Scott Witter. Thanks so much, guys, for taking the time. Scott, how you feeling? I know Maddie was on the podcast just last week, but how you feeling about this team right now heading into the Olympics? I know you've been waiting a long time for this kind of moment to finally come to fruition.
I feel great. I feel great after the bronze medal at the World Cup, and really, you have that team almost fully intact, and there's a good possibility of adding to what were some of the weaknesses last summer. So I'm pretty positive. I know there's been some difficult news the last couple days with a couple dropouts. I always expected that. I'm not naive. We've seen this for long enough that things come up and stuff happens. And I never expected, when I saw that 20-man roster, all of those guys to make it to the end. So we had a couple dropouts that I think were probably higher probability dropouts, and fingers crossed that there's no more. And if there aren't any more, I think we're putting a banger team on the floor here.
Maddie, just maybe your reaction to, and we'll start with Andrew Wiggins because I think he's probably the most notable to begin training camp. Wasn't included in the roster. Rowan Barrett kind of said it was Golden State's decision to not include him. What do you make of Wiggins not being out of here, and how do you see how the whole situation played out?
Well, I thought I felt bad for Wiggs right off the hop. I think this was obviously something that he wanted to do and uh, was making a real effort to show up, be at camp. I know his mother's an Olympian. It's sort of a legacy thing, and all the politics aside, if you will, this is a tough situation for Andrew Wiggins, and you feel for the player and the person, and for it to come down to 23rd hour type thing before camp opened up was kind of weird. And obviously there's a lot of speculation that the Warriors are looking to deal him in some type of move, trying to keep him healthy. So yeah, disappointing. Obviously for Wiggs first and foremost, and as a fan base and a support community, yeah, it's tough, but it's kind of wild that but Canada basketball as a program can sort of weather that without any hiccup, if you will. Like the team, like Scott said, that's going to eventually hit the floor is going to be still really, really good, and to not really, I don't want to say miss or worry about not having Andrew Wiggins, but it's just you move forward, and I think the resilience of the team last summer sort of helps with that too. We know what we have hitting the floor here in Paris with this core group, and you add Jamal Murray and Andrew Nemhard, and that's a really strong group nonetheless. So feel for Wiggs 100%, and the program. I know this was something everybody desperately wanted, but we move forward, and uh, we'll see what the roster looks like without him, right? As we start playing.
Scott, do you 100% believe that this was completely Golden State's doing, or do you think Andrew Wiggins had a say in maybe him not showing up to training camp?
Well, let's look at it this way. Technically, the only way Golden State can prevent Wiggins from playing, this is in the agreement between FIBA and the NBA, is if he has a legitimate injury that the team doctors have diagnosed it and have kind of officially documented it as an injury. So I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if you guys had heard that. I know there was certainly talk of him nursing, somewhat of an injury at the end of the season, but he was playing and he seemed fine. And he's had a lot of time since then to recover. So I don't know if there's a real injury here. I don't know to what degree the Warriors are blocking this. I know there's been different fingers pointed through the media. And I do not know what level that Andrew had in agreeing to this, or as the Warriors said, it was a mutual decision. What I do know is if a team really doesn't want you to play, they can, pressure you to not play. Your agent's going to pressure you, or your family or handlers are going to pressure you. So there's a lot of pressure on these guys coming from different directions. I wasn't necessarily surprised that Wiggins stepped out here. I don't know if I agree with the finger pointing, saying that this is all the Warriors. I don't know if we'll ever know. There's a history here with Andrew. I feel bad for the guy. He kept there's a lot of undeserved flack he's gotten over the years. But it doesn't help him that, I don't know, the last time he talked about this, or I shouldn't say the last time he talked about this, he talked about this a year ago about not being part of the World Cup team and whether he wanted to be with the Olympics. And he went on record saying, maybe I will, maybe I won't, I won't lose sleep over it if I'm not. So, saying some of those things publicly, you kind of go, how badly did he want to play? If there wasn't a legitimate injury here, he technically cannot be stopped by the Warriors. So I don't know. I'm not going to say one thing or the other. I'm just going to kind of question everybody and everything that's been said behind this.
I guess, maybe I'm skeptical and maybe I just have never really liked Golden State, but obviously Steph Curry's great. But is this a little bit of Steve Kerr trying to water down the competition? Am I just going a bit Bill Simmons here and putting conspiracies out there? Or what do you think, maybe, Maddie? Is that something where, you wear two hats, you wear your Golden State hat and you wear your Team USA hat as well if you're Steve Kerr?
Well, I think that was out there. Like that was one of the anecdotes in the media side that Scott's talking about. Like, is could that have some weight to it? Maybe. I mean, maybe Steve Kerr's looking at it like he knows his team's not going to be as tight as a group as say Canada is with continuity. So any little advantage, I don't know. Like Scott says, you can question a lot of things and maybe dissect different points. And um, I just know in the short window, if you will, when the season ended, it sounded like Andrew Wiggins was pretty on board and optimistic and keen to go to camp with Canada, make an effort to play, represent Canada basketball in the Olympics. So, um, he was doing interviews and stressing that, and a lot can change for a player going back to a year like Scott referenced where he was kind of wishy-washy. So, it sounded like he was on board and excited about this and maybe looking at it like an opportunity in camp to sort of find his game again, like a lot of guys do, uh, resurrect things or improve things. I mean, that's good competition going on in camp, right? So he's missing out on that. And the unfortunate part is fast forward 4 years from now in the next cycle, in the next Olympic Games for Los Angeles, like he's 4 years older as a player. And, where's he going to be at career wise? Like this might have been his last shot and only shot. So,
Yeah.
you know, um, yeah, who knows? I mean, you've been around camp, Alex. Obviously, people that we follow and enjoy their work on the media side probably have more insight too. And like I said, Canada basketball is going to weather it, and thought they handled it well in terms of what was put out there, and the information at best they could. And um, it's tough, right?
Yeah, I would say just being at camp, and I'm not saying I have any inside information necessarily on this, but I would say what I kept hearing was more about Golden State, as Scott said, kind of using their leverage and their power and influence to kind of wield that decision, even if it is technically mutual. I think a certain
Yeah.
player they were looking at, maybe who is now a member of the Philadelphia 76ers. I think that might have been to try to keep Wiggins as part of that deal. There was a rumor I was listening to, I think the Los Post, and they talked about a deal for Levine for Wiggins and I forget who, Chris Paul, to the Bulls as a potential thing that had been out there. So, Wiggins is essentially a contract that Golden State has been trying to trade. And if, he gets injured or anything happens at the Olympics, that diminishes his value, right? And he didn't have a lot of value before heading into the summer. He was probably hoping for a bit of a Dylan Brooks resurrection, like Brooks did last summer with Team Canada, and so that's what I heard. Now, I wouldn't call that reporting, but that's more just kind of what I've heard, kind of at camp and from different people about maybe the decision as to why Wiggins is not on this team. And I do want to say my own personal opinion, and you guys can chime in. Obviously, Wiggins can be a very good player. I thought in 2021 at the Olympic qualifying tournament, he was probably Canada's best player. At the same time, this team didn't really need him compared to maybe others. I mean, Andrew Wiggins is a really good player, and I'm not saying Canada's better without him necessarily, but they do have a lot of wings. And if you insert him into this lineup, what I kept thinking when I saw Wiggins on that training camp sheet is he okay being on the bench? That was my initial reaction. Will he coalesce with his teammates and the staff and the group as essentially a bench player who would play significant minutes, I'm sure, but also not. I don't think he would have been a starter on this team, in my opinion. And maybe that comes into effect. That's what I thought as well when I heard he was out. Maybe he was told by Jordy Fernandez and Rowan Barrett, be a good soldier. You'll play 22 minutes a night, but you're not starting or whatever. I'm just speculating, but that did come into mind for someone who has been a bit in and out of the program, and I'm sure sees himself as a starting player in the NBA because he's essentially started every single NBA game he's ever played in. And so that's something I'd throw out. It seems like, Scott, you have kind of.
Well, do you think there was a path for him to kind of fill like a hole up front, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, no, for sure.
that's been an issue for Canada, and like you've had a season where Dwight Powell's really been a non-player, a non-factor in Dallas for at least the second half of the year. And I kept thinking is he a potential if not starting but high minutes power forward on this team? Especially the way Jordy likes to play. It might be matchup specific, and we certainly, I kind of feel we're going to be undersized no matter what. But does his kind of speed, athleticism, multi-toolness just give us the advantages that can kind of counter something like that? He rebounds well for his size, plays good defense, stuff like that. I don't know.
No, I would agree. I think that would be the kind of way he'd fit on this team is as a four, essentially, right? Him, Brooks kind of sharing that position. I don't think we'll see Kelly Olynyk and Dwight Powell playing together much in meaningful games. I think that ship has probably sailed just because of the defense. And that's what we saw last year at the end of the tournament where those players weren't really playing too much together. So yeah, I think that would have been his fit on this team. At the same time, and it's kind of obvious when you insert Jamal Murray, Andrew Nemhard, some of the depth changes in terms of
Yeah,
the rotations, players kind of
yeah.
don't need to play Lou Dort as much necessarily or Nikhil, like all that changes. Now, as you said, he's really the only wing outside of Brooks, you would say, and maybe RJ on a good day that can play at the four. As much as I love Lou Dort, I don't know if I want him at the four, right? So that
This isn't the NBA too, right? So FIBA is kind of a little bit of a notch down in size. It's not everybody. There's some big bruising centers and forwards, but a lot of teams don't have that, right? So I would think there's a little bit more of an ability for Brooks and Barrett to kind of step up into that role
yeah.
against some teams, if not all.
Yeah, no, I would agree. So yeah, I'm not saying I want to preface it's not like Canada got better without Wiggins, but I do think
Yeah,
inserting him in different ways, and I don't
simpler.
Maddie thinks like to the chemistry, like you've talked about this, Scott,
Yep,
about like
yep,
chemistry. That
yep.
was my worry was does Wiggins come up and just say I'm the starter and right? And Dylan Brooks said something interesting. I don't know if maybe I asked him, I don't forget, but he basically talked about Jordy Fernandez and it's like he's no bullshit, he's no politics, whatever. And I just wonder what he meant by that
Mhm.
because I think some of that was what he essentially said was no matter who you are, you're on this team and you're trying to win and,
Yeah,
kind of check
right.
egos at the door. Right. And I don't mean that Dylan Brooks was necessarily talking about Wiggins but I think what he was probably talking about in a sense is that sure, you're in the NBA and you make millions of dollars, but this is a different team and we're trying to win a gold.
Yeah,
right? And you just because you make whatever, you play whatever in the NBA, this is a different team and we want to win, right?
correct. And
And
there
I
was some commentary too from Kelly saying, he was
that
going
was
on about
I
how
think that was
seamless, right, and everything is with the guys who played last year. But the real work is kind of trying to integrate these new guys, and there's
yeah,
some
no,
difficulty
that was the
there.
question I asked him. I said basically, like, you talk about chemistry and how do you see the team kind of coming together now at camp between the guys who were there last summer and the new guys. And he said exactly what you said. It's like you can't just throw five guys on the floor and win in 7 days and expect to win the gold medal, right?
Yeah.
You have to have that chemistry. So that's my point. I feel like Maddie, do you have any kind of insight into this little debate or
I just
conversation?
like I kind of find it like I'd be hard pressed to believe like the coaching staff like pre-camp or early on would kind of pull a guy aside like Wiggs and kind of set out like sort of minute uh, uh table, if you will, on a guy like that because so I don't know that I don't think that's a factor where Andrew Wiggins didn't want to accept some type of role because I just feel like they all know they're all pros and NBA guys. They see each other throughout the year. Like they know who's going to play a lot for this team, uh, who's going to be kind of in what rotation. So I don't think they necessarily lay out a lot of like role specific stuff for a guy. I think especially a player like Wiggins and an athlete like that, you just if he was available and he was going to play, then you just get him on the floor. And Jonathan made a good point last week where he's sort of that lob threat and vertical pop guy, baseline movement, catch an offensive rebound, so he's just going to
Yeah.
contribute in that way on this team. And so, I'm more inclined to believe it's just Golden State putting their foot down. And I don't think Canada basketball and the staff and Rowan, if you will, are putting out a lot of like
Yeah.
structure minute stuff like on this guy or anyone because we know how this team is going to unfold. I think, as the games start based on who was a huge chunk of this team last year, right? And, um, I don't know if that was the reason that he's not available, then you know, I'm kind of thinking other things, I guess. But yeah, it's just
Maybe
that's
peeved.
that's my thought. Yeah, yeah.
I guess what I would say, and I think this was maybe my point that I didn't articulate as well, and is just that people see the name Andrew Wiggins off the roster and they say, "Oh my God, this team, they just lost this player." And I
Never
and
had
I
him.
and I see Scott, and I think we're in agreement. As good as he is Canada 5% worse, maybe from their peak? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, probably. Does that mean that it dramatically changes the fortunes of this team? I don't think so. And that's kind of where I line or I see it in terms of it's a miss, but it's not as big as maybe the name would suggest for this roster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I want to move on, I think, unless you guys have anything to touch upon for Wiggins, but I want to move on to someone who I once told he had a double-double against Lebanon, and I was mistaken. He had 10 points in 10 minutes, not 10 points and 10 rebounds. And that is Zach Edey. Obviously, he was, two-time National Player of the Year, went ninth overall to the Grizzlies, and they've essentially decided to pull him out of this camp. Just maybe your initial thoughts of how that maybe affects this roster, considering as Scott alluded to it, there's just not a lot of size, and Zach Edey brings a lot of size and a lot of skill as well.
Mhm.
Maybe Matt, what was your first reaction to him being pulled out?
Well, I know, like the draft on last Wednesday, like I was in Victoria and around all the Canada basketball people, and the draft was going on as we were in the arena for the women's game, and saw Memphis with the ninth pick grab him, and I hustled over to Muad and said, "Hey, you better get this out there." And then, Mike Bartlett had come over, and they were stressing that Rowan was on the phone right away with Memphis and Glenn Grunwald, who's an advisor, and to try to get this into their ear, like, hey, we'd love to have Zach at camp, and it's a situation that's happened many times, but not only Canada basketball, but other programs too. So, um, kind of not surprised. It's tough for Zach. I think this is something he obviously wanted to do. Enjoys being with this team and this group of guys, and he has put it out there. Like, my improvement in the last couple summers has been big due to my time with Canada basketball, right? So, the lack of size hurts the team, no question. And this is not the same Zach Edey that was playing last summer at the FIBA World Cup, right? This is a much better player, a more conditioned player, more polished in his game. I think he's definitely more confident. So I think his role was going to be something that maybe could have been the surprise of the tournament for this team in some situations, which would have been really cool, as a fan base. But yeah, just it's with him and Wiggins in that sense of not being available. It's next man up, and it's easier to weather it because of the guys that are going to go. And I mean, Zach's going to be a key piece probably in 4 years, you would think, and 3 years for the next World Cup, right? So I was curious and excited to see what he was going to do this summer for Canada. But he's making a choice that you can't really blame and or fault in a sense. He's got to think about his long term future and earnings and take care of his family.
Scott, what was your reaction when you heard that?
Uh, color me shocked, right? I won't say I knew this was going to happen, but I was pretty. I was at one point I was very confident. A couple months ago, I'm like, hey, there's a 20% chance he's playing. Why? Recently drafted players do not play internationally right after being drafted. There's so many pressures against them to get ready for the NBA from their clubs. They all have these like NBA camps about how to, deal with, their financial life and life on the road and all that sort of stuff going into new cities. And listen, it's just when has a recently drafted guy ever played for Canada? I threw that out there. I think somebody came back with me that Todd McCullough might have way back when, but he was like a late second round, or he was a second round draft pick, and you know they're almost probably encouraging him to go do that. But a first rounder, let alone a lottery pick, is not going to play in almost every circumstance for every country. I'm sure it's happened, but it's very, very rare. So color me shocked. And then I also say, listen, he was not an important part of the team last year. He was not integral to the team. He didn't have a meaningful role. He wasn't really too playable. But he's changed massively in the last year, right? So I even got my hopes up, and I think I got to the point of saying, hey, I think there's a 50-50 chance now, because he was talking about he was going to play. Rowan was talking about he was going to play. It's the Olympics. And I'm like, well, maybe there's a chance. And then boom, of course, it doesn't happen. So he's, I wanted to see him there because I wanted to know if he can have an important role on this team. We've heard so much about him just crushing the workouts and how much he's changed. He could have been the key. Who knows, right? Probably not, but you never really know. And I wish he was there so I could have seen it. And if he wasn't ready, then he's deep on the bench, and you throw him in there for some spot minutes. So it is what it is. It's unfortunate. It's a thin position for Canada anyways. It's going to be interesting to kind of see what comes out of the camp to fill that role. That's probably the most interesting camp battle. But yeah, sad, but not surprised that Zach isn't playing. But looking forward to the future to see what he can bring.
I think what you said at the end there about all the workouts and all the buzz coming from Edey was really what excited me, because I know our buddy Jonathan Chen is a big believer, and I just see that. I think it was 11-0 run against the USA, and I can just see it in that bronze medal game where he goes on for 2 minutes and they just cook him right on defense. And I don't mean that because I thought he was a terrible player, but I just thought at the highest level, I don't think he's there yet defensively.
Yeah.
And this team isn't necessarily, as Jordy Fernandez talked about, their issues are defensive more than they are offensive at this current moment.
Or you have to build your team around him, right?
Yeah.
And you don't do that for really a bench big. if he was the centerpiece of the team, then I could see them, structuring a system that works and hides his disabilities and helps his advantages. But that's tough to do when it's a bench guy coming in for 10 minutes a game or something.
Exactly. So if he was adequate defensively, which maybe he was and is, then I would have felt, okay, well, you can throw him against Jokic, you can throw him against Wemby. He's not going to stop them, but it's just a guy with size who can also punish them on the other end. But just the buzz made me feel like I was kind of out on him on being on this
Yeah,
roster, and then the buzz made me think, oh,
wanted to see
well,
him.
if he's there, if he's good, if he's what everyone's saying, then maybe he'd be the perfect player to, as you said, insert into
Yeah.
this lineup. So
Sounds like it wouldn't have hurted. We all agree it wouldn't have hurt to have him on the team, and
yeah,
there could have been potential upside that never know if it was meant to
yeah.
be or not.
And at the same time, it's kind of like the Wiggins where the name probably outweighs his impact terms like we'd all want the best players on this team. And at the same time, there's some chemistry stuff and there's some things that, this team does need size as we've alluded to it. But at the same time, I don't know, is Zach Edey ready for the biggest games compared to, I don't know, Kem Birch if his legs work, or like there's other players that might be ready for the current moment,
Yeah,
even though Edey probably as a whole is much more talented, and especially heading into 2028, that'd be pretty nice to have him as maybe the starting center if he's really developed into the player he hopes to be. So it will be a really fascinating future. I don't think this is the last time we've seen Zach Edey play for Canada. I don't think that was last summer. I think he'll be part of this team moving forward,
yeah,
and in the 2027 World Cup, Olympics, hopefully. So, but at the end of the day, it does suck, but it's probably not the end of the world, as though some people, maybe not saying it's the end of the world, but that it's this huge miss. I think that's probably a bit too out of proportion.
yeah.
Um, yeah. I guess is anything else on the Edey front? I think we can move on to I think what we've been dreaming of for a long time, especially with the emergence of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Jamal Murray in the past couple of years, is actually seeing them on court in a game. I still hope that Jamal Murray plays at the Olympics. I still don't know if it's definitive at this point. But I asked Shai on, I forget, I think Saturday night, about how his game complements that of Jamal Murray, and he said, "I like to drive. I drive and he shoots," and that sounds like a pretty good tandem with Jamal Murray and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. How excited are you guys for just to finally watch those guys play together, and how do you think they complement each other? Maybe Scott.
I, I'm extremely excited. We've been waiting for this for a long time. I almost try not to get like too excited about it or my hopes up because I'm just that cynical, skeptical person who still thinks I'm not going to believe Murray's on this team until not only I see him in the exhibitions, but like I see him in Paris. I'm still just concerned, worried about it. There always seems to be issues. But yeah, it's I think they certainly complement each other. I'm not as much the X and O as and O's guys here with John. I wish Jonathan was here, but I can't really see a reason why they don't fit together. The only concern I think is going to be on the defensive side of things. But maybe this is a situation where I think Shai is a very, very good defensive player and can't always show that at OKC. So he's carrying such a heavy load offensively. But like, he led the league in steals this year, right? So, maybe this just gives him a chance to kind of, step up and focus on that a little bit more because of the offensive burden is taken a little bit off of him. This is really what we needed last year. I think we all saw that Shai was probably ridden a little too hard there, and we just didn't really have competent, ball backup for him. So not only does Murray come in, but Nembhard coming in, I think helps that quite substantially. So that could allow Shea to really, step up the defensive intensity. But I'm like I said, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm going to keep my fingers crossed until I actually see it.
Maddie, what will go through your mind when you see both of those guys on the court, maybe in Vegas, in that backcourt starting and finally see the dream that we've all been waiting for?
Yeah, the thought's gonna be about damn time. Like, Jamal has been, a player that we've, you know, elevated within Canada basketball, and that Canadian identity, and he's enjoyed the benefits of that too, and being an NBA champion now. And he hasn't played for the men's team since 2015 in the Pan Am Games when he was 18 years old. So, you know, as a fan base, it's like, we're due. We need to see this. So far, he's holding that up for us with camp, and we want to dub it the best backcourt in the world. And we've seen him just go off in moments, especially in these playoffs and that first round against the Lakers, hitting big shots. And I mean, it just takes some pressure off Shea, where Shea can now maybe make that extra play defensively, like Scott said. And if Jamal gives you a third quarter heater of 12 points all of a sudden, like where he's just unconscious, right? Like that'll just be, an advantage that we just didn't have in moments last year in the World Cup. And then I like what Scott said too. Like it's the combo of Jamal and Andrew Nemhard that I think is going to be the real benefit. And our friend Jonathan Chen has been loving the Nemhard stuff. And I just think it's like that 1A, 1B for the two of them to help Shea on this team, right? Like they're both great players in their own right. But um, yeah, and listen, like whoever they're running, high post and screen and roll and dribble handoff um with Shea with the ball in his hand, and if whoever he's coming off on those screens, and Jamal's sitting in a tight corner in a pocket ready to shoot it. I mean, I like our chances to have some good plays happen, right? And Shea's gonna make the read, right? Come off it and go into the paint a little bit, and sit for his little floater or little shot, and it. I mean, I'm curious. You mentioned Vegas. Like, how I wonder how much we're going to see in that game in terms of some situations where Jordy's going to hold some things to his chest, right? I mean, that's he mentioned it. They're not in that game to win it. They want to run some stuff and see what things look like. And these are players that um, on any given night can cook anybody in the NBA. So whoever we face, Canada faces on the other side with these guys on the floor, I think we got um, Canada should have pretty good confidence, right?
I think the fun part is like who takes the last shot, right? And that'll be fun too. I still think you go to Shea, as he said, he'll drive, either gets a shot or kicks out to Jamal in the corner, but that'll be really fun. At the same time, I
You
also
guys can come back to me when Kelly hits the winner.
well, I know you still think about that shot against the US
Uh,
that he went,
yeah.
oh my God.
No, I mean, he's the captain, right? Like I would love for Kelly to have a huge moment. That's just the selfish side of me. But I think you just give Shea the ball and just see where it goes, man. I mean, he's done it so many times. And recently in the last year, in his MVP campaign, that um, he's gonna make a good decision. I do believe that, right? So
No, I completely agree. And the one thing, and I know I'm looking at Scott, and I think I see like the pessimism of all the years flowing through the screen.
Experience.
And and I still, a part of me, what I've heard is that he hasn't signed the extension with that. There's no like agreement with the Nuggets. That's was when I was at camp. That's what I heard. Now things can change in 3 days in the NBA. We all know that. I just he hasn't. He's been taking part, but he's kind of, I don't know, his work, what he said yesterday to Jonathan and the rest of the media, or 2 days ago, seemed like he was gonna play if he's healthy.
I
And
said last year,
exactly.
if I'm healthy, if.
Yeah.
Ah,
So I still think I would say that it feels a bit less pessimistic than last year in terms of just the way he talked about, like last year he kind of said, I'm really tired. It was a bit less of that this year. Um, I think for me, and I said it last year, and I'm sure you guys remember, if he gets on that plane to Vegas, I think that's probably means that, and he plays at all in that game, um, then I think he's going to Paris. I don't think he goes to Europe and then bails, unless like he tears a knee or something like that. But I just mean like in terms of realistically, um,
Yeah.
that's my tipping point is
Yeah.
July 6th or July
Yeah.
5th, whenever they
Well,
wrap
what
up.
they do last year, he didn't join and said that he was going to meet the team in Spain for the last couple exhibition games, right?
Yeah. So
You know,
I we'll see,
most of us
but
knew
I
that
do
was going to
think,
happen.
his dad's been around the camp the whole time. I don't remember him
Good.
last year. Maybe he was, but it like you see his dad around Jamal like every second. They're shooting the shit, as they say, and I do feel like it's. I still think if I had to bet money, he'll be at the Olympics.
I'm
Um,
there too. I'm just being realistically that there's
I
a
also don't think that until next week happens, or I guess the end of this week, I'd just be mindful. Like I wouldn't be, I'm not in, I'm sure you and I, Scott, are the same. I wouldn't be floored or shocked if I see a report from Doug Smith or Michael Grange or
yeah,
myself, probably not myself,
yeah,
but just joking there, that he's out. So we'll see, but if they are together, I think they're the best backcourt in the tournament ahead of the US. And I think that they can, if Jamal Murray is at the Olympics and even relatively healthy, I think Canada can win the gold medal. I don't think that is crazy to say. I know I got a lot of shit in the media room when I said I thought Canada's chances to get a medal were 50%. And I think that's the case if Jamal Murray is healthy. Jamal
yeah.
Murray's not healthy, then I'm gonna take a little bit of that back. But I think this team can definitely win a medal, definitely win a gold medal. And
What
I
shit in the media room did you get? Was that at the World Cup? Those guys couldn't
no,
win.
no, 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 like this week. So
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Why wouldn't Canada be like 50-50 shot at a
At a
medal?
medal, not
Not
not at a
gold.
gold medal. I just want to preface that. I didn't say it's
Yeah,
a 50% chance at a gold medal. So
absolutely.
yeah. So
Vegas odds, they have second highest odds of winning the gold medal.
yeah,
So
that should be enough to get you at 50% to get a medal. Yeah.
yeah.
I guess, Maddie, I'm just kind of curious, like watching the team last year, and you talked about Nemhard and obviously presuming Jamal's part of this team as well. Like, do you think Jordy just goes like five out? We're just gonna score on everyone. What kind of lineups do you think he should kind of go for? And he's also mentioned how much he wants the team to get better defensively. Maybe you throw Lou Dort, Dylan Brooks, Nikhil. That they can kind of go in a bunch of different ways. Like, what do you think maybe the best lineup is for this team heading into the Olympics?
Yeah, well, use your strength, which is, quick athletic wings and perimeter players. And I mean, matchup driven situations are going to be key. But, um, I think, the seven guys out of the NBA last year on the roster, Jamal Murray and Andrew Nemhard is nine guys right away, right? So your last three players that make this team, um, you got like, I know we'll get into it, but um, I feel Trey Lyles is going to be on this team now with Andrew Wiggins not available for sure, and Zach Edey. That's 10 NBA guys right there. Um, I just think they're going to do a lot of, you know, they maybe try to do some five out and dribble handoff and just put pressure on the other team's defense to stay up with them and keep pace, right? And um, maybe that allows for some defensive mistakes that kind of hide. So that'll be interesting. I think I think in some of those rotations, Kelly would be on the floor a bit more than possibly we think, just for having that high post. He's a good passer. Shoot it from there if he has to, if the shot comes to him. So that would be interesting, right? And maybe we'll get a sense of that a little bit in Vegas next week in terms of what they run. But we're lacking the size. Zach would have been really nice. But some of these other programs, they're loading up on skill and talent, no question. They're not as big as some of the you know, other programs that would have been at this tournament as say the World Cup. So maybe that's something we don't have to worry too much about.
Scott?
Yeah. I'm very interested to see how camp unfolds because I don't have a set starting five.
Mm-hmm.
And what was our starting five last year, right? It was
Brooks, RJ, Shea,
Kelly and Dwight.
yeah.
One of those guys goes to the bench, right? I honestly still think at this stage we're running Kelly and Dwight to start. Now, those guys might not get the bulk of the minutes up front, but I do think that's your starting front court. So either RJ or Brooks goes to the bench. I'm putting RJ to the bench just for Dylan Brooks's just defensive acumen, and just to kind of help take that pressure off of Murray and Shea. So that might shock a lot of people. A lot of people might think, I still think a lot of people think RJ is kind of one of the top 3 or 4 guys here. I'm not too sure if that's the case.
I don't know.
And then I don't know where we go from that, right? I don't know if he's coming in first and Powell comes out or we're running kind of with one big up front. I don't know if Brissett can worm his way into a role here. So I just don't know exactly what's going to happen here. They have a lot of pieces. How much do we play Trey Lyles? What's his role? Who wins that camp battle for that last big? Kyle Alexander, who played last year and probably has the most familiarity with Jordy in the system. Kem Birch, who probably is the most experienced. We don't know how healthy he is. Kabengele, who probably has the more pieces and upside, but is probably the least amount of experience. He actually probably gives us a little bit of rim protection, can kind of hit the three. I'm very curious about him, but is that just kind of a lost role anyways? That's just your 12th man, some emergency minutes or what? So I still think there's a lot to find out with this team, and we'll see.
I was going to ask about the final spots, and I think we talked about it on the last show, but obviously things changed because Andrew Wiggins and Zach Edey have pulled out. But for me, I think also Edgem there. I wonder if he's like a legacy pick as well, right? As you said, like, is it even possible to bring another, a big if they're not going to play? I still think you should bring a backup center, regardless.
Mm-hmm.
I think Brissett makes much more sense without Wiggins, because he can kind of play the 4, and he's a good defender as well. Can not really shoot, but kind of shoot, kind of Lou Dort, but worse vibes.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways they go, but I do think, you talked about RJ. I think he's a really interesting case study for this team because he did play, he was very up and down at the World Cup, ended well in that USA game. Defensively isn't what people think he is. And at the same time, the way he ended with the Raptors was so good that, and on a pretty high, like it wasn't just like 10 games, it was like 30 games essentially. I think he's perfect in that 6-man role. Off the bench, him and Nemhard, played literally at Montford together, played for the national team here in Ottawa in 2018 with Dylan Brooks. I think that makes sense. But it's going to be interesting. Like, does Nikhil get that much minutes? Does Lou Dort get a lot of minutes? I think the trio of Nemhard, Shea, and Jamal should be probably two of those 3 players should be on the court at all times and in like a meaningful game, like in the quarterfinals of the Olympics or something like that, or a big group stage.
Let me ask you this. We probably all agree on 10 players, right? And stop me if you disagree, right? It's Shea, Nemhard, Jamal, Dort, Nikhil, RJ Barrett, Dylan Brooks, Kelly Olynyk, Dwight Powell, and Trey Lyles, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That's 10.
Agreed.
So we're probably in agreement that there's going to be a big, there, and that's like Kyle Alexander, Kevin Gelly, or Kem
Bert.
Birch. And then you're down to probably another kind of wing forward type player. To me, it's that comes down to Edgem or Shea Brisset, right? Or I don't know, maybe not. But that's kind of my thoughts. Where would you guys go for those last two players?
If I'm being completely honest, I love Melvin Edgem. I might be talking to him soon this week at camp, but um, I think for me, if Birch is healthy, I go with him as the one of the bigs. If he's healthy, I haven't seen, like, at camp, I don't really see them running drills, so I can't really attest to if he's
Mm-hmm.
relatively healthy. He's my pick just because he has the experience. He's big, like he's really strong, like against a Jokic, like he's undersized, but
Mm-hmm.
I think he matches up well. I didn't think I saw enough from Alexander at the World Cup to really demonstrate that he's good enough to play at that kind of next level. Cabangeli, it's the Olympics. I just don't know. Like
Yeah.
if he maybe in 2 years from now and the player he is then, I just don't know. But
Yeah.
maybe, if Birch is injured, Alexander's it might make sense. And then I would just go Brissett probably.
Yeah.
Because I think with Wiggins out, it makes a lot of sense to have a guy who can essentially play small ball four, can't really shoot and doesn't really bring much offense, but is good enough as a decent passer for who he is and a pretty good defender, which this team actually, when you look at it, they don't have a lot of elite defenders. You have Dort, Brooks, and then find me a player who's elite. They don't really have one. So I think it might make sense to bring in Brissett. But that'd
Yeah.
be my two. I think Maddie would go a bit different on this, but I'm just curious. I feel like Maddie might have a certain Melvin Edgem as part of his final two spots.
Yeah, I love Mel. I haven't hidden that. But outside my last two picks, I feel like, hopefully they're not, you know, and I don't mean like it's in a negative way to them, but hopefully they're not really playing much, right? So if we got 10 guys that we can plug in rotation wise that are NBA guys that are rotational NBA players, right? I mean, Dwight would have played more in Dallas this year, just given if they just hadn't had Lively, like he's still an effective player. But um, my preference, I know Kem was a guy that committed as part of the core and fell out of the NBA, had injuries. When he first got to Toronto, looked really good, and he is very strong. I like Kyle Alexander's mobility a little more, um, a little bit more springy. But and then my last spot, like, yeah, so my last two, like, just kind of a homer pick in a sense, would probably be Kyle Alexander and then Melvin Edgem, right? And I think um, Mel's done a lot for the program. We all know that, so that would be a guy that continues that on. That's a great story too. That Yvonne was named to the women's team today as well. So, and then I was just looking because I know O'Shea's at camp, and I kind of want to actually throw him in there in a sense, maybe over the need to have a big, and um because I think he adds that little bit of that verticality like that Wiggins would have, but
Mm-hmm.
he's trying to find a team that can give him more playing time. The door's not closed to return to Boston, um, but he hasn't signed anything yet. So, that's almost a credit to him to be at camp when his contract situation is a little unknown right now. There's kind of a report that he has signed a 1 year deal, but I don't think it's accurate with Boston to
Okay.
go back to the Celtics. But um, it looks like it's not accurate. So
Yeah.
uh, the Boston Globe writer that covers the Celtics is still saying he's looking for a deal. Um, listen, that those last two picks, almost like Mr. Irrelevant in a sense. It'll be great for those two players to make this team and be an Olympian, but um,
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to play a ton. I know we need a big, so it's kind of stupid for me to say we don't need,
I was
or
gonna
I
say,
don't want Kyle Alexander or Kem Birch. I know we need one of
Yeah.
them, right? But Kyle's played through the winter windows when he could, and part of
Yeah.
the team last summer. So I think he just a little more springy, moves a little better, but maybe lacks some of the strength to bang with the oak trees there.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Like the I think there's really 11 spots that are. I think the last spot, especially without Wiggins and Edey, like if they went Edgem over Brissett, would you really get that upset? I don't like.
I wouldn't,
I
but
think Brissett. I would pick Brissett just because I'd rather have more
Yeah.
talent. But you can,
I,
yeah,
I don't know what Edgem adds on the floor, to be honest, guys. My heart says Melvin Edgem, but I don't think he can add any value on the floor. His values with the team, on the bench, in practice.
yeah,
Can you get that by just keeping him with the team?
that's a fair point.
My brain is Brissett can actually add some value here potentially.
Yeah, no,
And then with the bigs, it's just like, I don't know if it's not that I don't care. I'm like, this is what a camp battle's for. Like, pick the one that's going to add the best value for how you guys want to play, because they all do something a little bit differently, but it has to be one of those three.
Melvin gets on the floor when we blow teams out, and then you give him the legacy minutes to say, Mel, get on the floor during the Olympics. You know what I mean? So,
yeah,
because we're gonna blow somebody out for sure.
I don't know.
Well,
I actually don't know.
Come on, man.
They
I keep
should.
saying we like I'm on the team, but
Well, you are.
12 players. You got to be careful, right? Somebody gets hurt kind of mid-tournament or something. You might need that.
No, and that's that. I'm being foolish when I say like those last two spots don't matter. Like I know they matter, and you're right. It's camp competition. Somebody's got to go win a spot. Somebody's got to make an impression, and maybe, Jordy knows probably Kyle better than he does Kem just from last summer.
Yeah.
But yeah, go win a spot, right? I mean, you got to figure those 10 or spots are probably locked now.
I got a question for you guys.
Yeah.
So just to confirm, Shaden Sharp, Leonard Miller, Benek Mathurin are all at camp, right? No, Mathurin's not?
Yes, they're all at camp. All three of them.
They're all at camp.
I've seen all three at camp. Yep.
Are they participating in any way? Is there any chance? I know they say they're not in the running to make the team. And I believe that. I believe that's to kind of partially, I don't know why you would say that. It's probably to save face. Those little guys would likely be cut. And it's just like, hey, you're not going to be cut. They're not in the team. But theoretically, like just say somebody gets hurt, Murray doesn't play, and somebody else gets hurt. Is there, those guys can play, right? Or do you think they're just predisposed? They're not going to play. Their clubs, the Trailblazers said, hey, you can go to camp, but there's no way you're playing, type of thing. Do you have any read on that?
I think they made their bed with this decision. Canada basketball, in terms of that they're out of contention, as you said, Jordy and Rowan said that. They are taking part in, like, you see them and they're wearing a Canada jersey and they're doing shoot arounds. Like I can't see the practices, but they look at, if you just walked into the gym, you wouldn't say, oh, they're not part of the team, right?
Yeah.
When you see them at.
But you think let's hit craziness. Jamal, Dort, RJ all go down. Phil Scrubb's on the team and not Shaden Sharp.
Well, medically, are they cleared?
It's a great question, because
I don't know. I'm asking you guys. Alex is at camp. This is my question. I don't know.
I would say right now, I would say I think you're right there, where that they would go to, maybe not Phil Scrubb, but maybe it's like another big, or Melvin Edgem joins the team or something like that. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Matherin's still struggling with an injury. I don't think he's been. I don't think he's been wearing he hasn't been participating in the practices from what I've seen. Miller and Sharp have, for sure. I think Sharp, he's so raw.
Yeah.
I just don't know. Like it almost, and it's at a position where, like, they have a bunch of shooting guards. Right.
Yeah. There's no defense there. I get it. I was just curious.
No, it's a great question. I think, I guess if 3 of their top 8 go down with an injury, maybe they revisit that idea. I think at the present moment, like, let's say Murray drops out, I still don't think that really brings it in.
Like I said, last summer they pulled in Kenny Cherry because so many guys dropped out, right?
Yeah.
So, he didn't end up making the final team, but he started playing exhibition.
I do think it's a bit different with the Olympics. Like I think all 7 guys will be there. from last year,
Yeah.
unless they get injured in a and you know you never know, right? Kelly Olynyk did it back in the day, which I still haunts me. Um, and I was gonna say something, and I think Andrew Nemhard for sure is not draw. I would be I think he's pretty locked in.
Yeah.
Will
We
be
need
at
him.
yeah. So I'm not worried about him. Brissett, I have no. If you told me Brissett doesn't skips out last minute, from what I've heard, I don't feel very confident in him
As
necessarily being
for
on the team, especially if he's a free agent.
yeah.
So yeah, it's a good question. Like, they didn't keep Corey, they didn't keep, but I don't think Corey makes any sense with if Nemhard's there.
Mhm.
Same with, Boucher. I don't think he makes a lot of sense on this roster. I think they have enough depth at the wings, and I think Trey Lyles, what I was going to say, I think Trey Lyles is actually a really low key big ad for this team because
Yeah.
they do not have a lot of size. He's
Yeah.
legit like 6'9", 6'10". He can shoot.
Mhm.
He's actually a pretty
Mhm.
good rebounder, which this
Mhm.
team obviously struggled with. So
Yeah.
I really think he'll bring a lot
Great.
to this team.
Shout out Saskatoon, Saskatchewan,
I
man.
know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's cool. I know he didn't really grow up there, but you know, I think he's gonna have a moment in the situation. Like I watched a lot of Sacramento games when they would come on at 8 o'clock out here,
Good season.
and um, yeah, he can have a moment in a situation, knock a shot down. Um, yeah, I think like hopefully we're not in a situation where we're dealing with some injuries and it's like holy we gotta bring in and Shaden Sharp's a good player, no doubt, right? But um, you know, he's raw, and he had good stretch with Portland, and he'd be the guy that would rip the rim off in the tournament or something like that, right? But
Yeah, no, I agree. I guess before we'll wrap up. I do want to talk a little about the women's team obviously announced their roster today. Just any thoughts? Achanwa, Kayla Alexander, Kyle Alexander's sister, Amahir, Carlton, Colley, Aaliyah Edwards, Yvonne Edgem, maybe Melvin Edgem joins her, Naira Field, Sammy Hill, Kia Nurse as always, and then Cassandra Prosper and Silas Swords, two young girls made the team too. Just any thoughts on this roster? Maddie, you were with them, so I think you should kind of lead the way on this one.
yeah, real quick, not really any surprises. Like it was going to be a vet heavy team, a last run at this for a lot of the players in the program. Four of them are in the W right now, so they weren't with the team last week in Victoria. And just what I saw in Victoria, like Victor LaPena, the head coach, was doing a good job of getting everyone in on rotation so that he could get a look at what people were doing. I guess the only real surprise for me, I thought maybe they would try to bring one more big between Emily Potter or Filipina Kai, or Key, pardon me. So with neither of them there, that's a little bit of a surprise, but they're bringing along a bit of the youth movement. Sila's an incredible player and going to make history as an 18-year-old playing for Canada basketball at the Olympics, and Cass Prosper, excuse me, that game last week against Portugal in Victoria was her first game since her injury. So I know she was excited to do that and looks really good. And she is impressive in the sense like she's really athletic and long, has a nice touch. So not surprised she's on the team. And Yvonne, I know her a little bit, talked through IG and had her on the podcast, and man, she's a worker, athletic, tough. She likes to mix it up, throw a little bows in the paint, which is always fun to see. Doesn't back down from anybody. So yeah, not surprised. And um, I think the only one that they left off that maybe had a shot was Aislinn Koenig, who they had at the World Cup as well. Kind of been a fixture on the senior women's team for a little while, but they're deep at guard. Um, and so disappointing for Aislinn, I'm sure, but pretty good team, man. They got a tough pool, right? Like as much as we kind of talk about the men, our senior women's national team has a tough group as well, and so they'll have to go in there and steal some wins probably, and rely on the vets, and we'll see what the four players that are playing in the W right now have to give right now when they played a lot of minutes in their pro stops right now, right? But yeah, it should be a good team, and the schedule is fun where um, the men play on the 27th on that first day, and then I think there's a 2-day break, then the women start. Um, so if you're following both sides of the program, lots of time to get ready to watch the games, man.
Yeah, and just so people know, I'm gonna shamelessly plug myself. I'll be doing postcasts for all the men's and women's games. So I'll be crazy. You'll be seeing too much of my face, so I apologize in advance. But I'm so excited for this women's team. I think, maybe it's the best team they've assembled. But they have struggled. They obviously struggled to qualify. Maybe the luckiest way to get in. They were missing a couple of their key players, and Kia Nurse, and obviously Aaliyah Edwards, and Edgem, and Prosper,
Yeah.
and others. So it's not as though they had a full roster, but they have struggled, and they struggled at the last Olympics, right? They didn't make it out of their group. So and it's a really hard group. But I still think there's a chance you get to a quarterfinal, play a team at your level, sneak into a semi, and then maybe you can get a bronze. I don't think that's out of the question, but I don't think they're medal favorites like Canada are, but they're also not, they're good enough. They came fourth at the last World Cup, and that was no joke. They played some really, really good basketball. So I'm just excited to see all of them back at the Olympic stage, and swan songs for Kayla Alexander, Natalie Achanwa, who've done so much for this program, and still ball. Kayla Alexander was amazing at the Olympic qualifying tournament. I think she averaged like 13 and 12 or something, just unbelievable.
They
So,
look just with Victoria real quick, Alex, like
yeah,
compared to what we saw in February. Um, Everyone looks really fit. Um, the fitness is there. I thought everyone looked really quick. And Portugal's not the greatest competition, but I thought defensively in moments too, they were really, really quick and athletic, moved really well, and you could see the difference in the fitness, and they looked really prepared. So I think they've given themselves the best chance they can heading into the Paris Olympics, man.
Scott, you excited to be watching some, finally not just watching the women's team, but men's and women's for like 2 weeks. Like I think that's what I'm just so excited about. It's gonna,
Yeah, and some 3-on-3 too.
I
We
know,
have
and
a
they
lot of
could
content there.
easily win a medal too. They've been really good for a long time, the 3-on-3 team. But it's
I
gonna be
got
a
a question.
yeah.
You're going, right?
No, I'm
Are
not
you?
going.
Oh, you're not ending up going.
Not
Okay.
going.
Is anybody
No,
going?
no, I need to petition the IOC to let Raptors Republic be credentialed.
Did you apply for media credentials
They don't, yeah, but that didn't go
anymore?
anywhere. That they need.
Yeah, I'm just curious. We
No,
know probably a little bit harder than the World Cup, right?
it's well, some people are big fish, like you, Scott, at
Yeah,
x.com, just killing it out there with your
yeah,
cover.
yeah.
I still will just, I wish, I think is the next World Cup. It's in like Abu Dhabi or something, or what?
Qatar,
Qatar.
Qatar.
Arf. Okay.
But let's be honest to all our thousands of listeners out there. If you ever have an intent to go to one of these things, you get a lot more bang for your buck going to the World Cup. There's a ton of content there. We had a fantastic experience, and we knew when we talked about it before, there's no way you can get that experience at the Olympics because
No.
everybody and their dog shows up, and every executive at every media company in Canada wants a all expense paid to France, right? And nobody but us two and Arash felt like it was worth going to Jakarta, Indonesia. So
It
we
was,
got everything under the sun thrown at us just for going that direction.
yeah,
So if
I think
anybody's
a lot
thinking
of
about
people,
it out there, go to Qatar.
Do you want to remind the listeners of your moment with your T-shirt and a certain Dylan Brooks and some other players on Team Canada? Do you want to?
I got dapped up a few times with my awful T-shirts when I was in the media scrum. So got a few snickers and a few people laughing amongst the players. So yeah, you're not going to get that close to them and getting that level of contact in the Olympics unless you're
My
just a
my
career
favorite
media person.
my favorite words in sports is X.com Scott Witter, Shea.
Mhm.
How do you think? And then yeah.
They reprimanded us. They told us you have to say what media organization you're with. So I'm like, all right, here we go.
Was it Trey Bell Haynes who kind of chuckled when you said X.com?
Oh yeah,
One of the players chuckled when you said X.com. I forget.
yep,
I think it was
yep.
Trey. I don't
Trey,
remember.
Trey's got a good
I
sense
think
of humor.
probably a few pretentious French media members in the crowd as well probably
Oh,
laughed.
I don't know if I've told this on the podcast last year, but there was I forget his name, but there was a French media reporter, and I speak a bit of French.
Yeah,
I can understand French, and there was maybe 5 to 6 French media at the
yep,
in Jakarta at the World Cup. And this one we had just been talking, and he was telling me about all these like French players because like I'm not Scott Witter
mhm,
and Jonathan Chen and watching EuroLeague. Uh,
yeah,
and I remember I did the podcast after, and we're like, there's this like media kind of room. There was a media room, and then up top you kind of could get food and stuff. And I'm doing my podcast after Canada blew out France.
yeah,
And right before I get on, he like comes up the stairs and he says, "Oh, like we're gonna beat you next time."
mhm,
And I'm like, "You just lost by 35. Like, why are you telling me as if I'm a player and on the team?" And anyways, I always remember the French. And then I went to another player, another reporter, and I kind of said like after the game, "What happened?" He's like, c'est la vie, and he just
yeah,
kind of shrugged. So it was a
yeah,
very French experience in
yeah.
Jakarta.
I remember them being quite angry that they weren't supposed to be asking questions in French and everything was supposed to be asked and answered in English, and that really upset
Yeah,
them.
they did not like that. I also remember Nick Batum just going off against this federation after they got eliminated. I don't know if you were in that scrum or in that presser, but after they got eliminated. Anyways, we're going on tangents
I
here. We're
guess. Yeah.
podcasting. This is fun. I guess just I think we probably should end off this. What teams like do you think Canada will play in their groups? There's the Olympic qualifying tournament wrapping up or starting, sorry.
Yeah.
And Canada will play the winner of the Spain Olympic qualifying tournament and the Greece one. Maddie, I know you've been following it a bit. Greece has obviously Greece and a one Luka Doncic who lost today to Croatia, who's a good team as well. And then in the Spain group, obviously Spain's been a powerhouse. Probably easily could have beat Canada if it wasn't for Shea and Dylan Brooks going off. And then there's also Bahamas with DeAndre Ayton and Eric Gordon and Buddy Hield in that group in Spain as well. Just maybe, and those will be two of the teams Canada will play in the opening round alongside Australia, who's no joke as well. So maybe just talk about those tournaments a little bit, Scott or Maddie,
Sure.
and maybe just the teams that Canada should maybe watch out for and maybe should be most scared of or most looking forward to maybe
Yeah.
seeing them in the group stage.
Yeah. I'll jump in, Maddie. Like the first day of the tournament was today, and there was already some kind of odd results. Croatia just smoked Slovenia. Luka looked gassed, injured, whatever. I honestly don't think Slovenia gets out of that from watching that first game. So I think you're going to see a Greece, maybe Croatia final. Dominican Republic's looking not bad there, but they don't have Carl Anthony Towns, but they have a few of the other NBA guys, including Chris Duarte. But I do think that kind of comes down to Greece, and Croatia's looking good with their NBA guys, and they finally got it together after years and years of playing horribly. So still think that's probably Greece, but we'll see. Greece is a very flawed team. They got Giannis, and then it can after that it can get a little ugly in certain areas. So we'll see there. On the other tournament, everyone thought this is a cakewalk for Spain. No real competition there. Finland doesn't have Laurie. Poland doesn't have a lot. But Bahamas, a lot of people are just, I don't think they know about them. They just throttled Argentina last year to get here
Yeah.
twice. They have a legit, I think they're a very volatile team. I won't be surprised. I think Bahamas and Spain go to the final in this qualifier. Calling Bahamas winning
Wow.
through with big upset.
I still like Spain just because it's in Spain, but it's gonna be. I think that game will go down to the wire.
I'm just being controversial. I'm probably wrong,
I
but
know.
I'm
I
pulling
know.
for Bahamas, so I'm
I
going to
do
call it.
think, in a sense, I think Canada would probably want the Bahamas just because I think their depth is just so much. Like it's 3 NBA guys, and then just Spain is more. We saw them at the World Cup, and
Yeah,
even though they don't have the talent that Canada has, and even in a sense, maybe the star and talent that Bahamas has,
yeah.
uh, they're
I think we'd kill Bahamas, and Spain will still give us a tough time because they're
yeah.
Spain.
Even though in a sense maybe Spain will struggle more with the Bahamas just because of the high end talent and
Yeah,
so and then as you mentioned, I think playing Greece as good as Giannis is, I think that might be a pretty big win for Canada if they make it out, even against Croatia, who actually like they have Zubac. I'm forgetting someone. There's an NBA player, Saric is a pretty good player, a better FIBA
yep.
player. Like they're no joke. But I think in a weird way, the stars are aligning a little bit for Canada, where I don't think they might play the best teams that maybe we thought they would. Kind of when the draw was announced. What about you, Maddie? How are you feeling about potential opponents in the first round and in the group stage at the Olympics?
Yeah, I was trying to get caught up on the games a little bit, but with Slovenia not looking strong and Luka having issues, I mean, and Greece hosting that tournament, you got to figure they're the favorite to come out. And I'm gonna go with Spain just because they're at home and they offer a little bit of that continuity and cohesion as a group more so than the Bahamas, even though the Bahamas probably have more talent. But Spain always plays with a lot of passion and pride too, so I'll give them that edge. And then because listen, Canada's still a favorite in this group. Like everyone knows that, and we know that. So if it wound up being Greece and Spain, Canada and Australia, um, Canada's still a favorite in that group, in my
That's so
opinion. And
too.
Canada had the big win against Spain last summer, thanks to Shea and Dylan Brooks. But yeah, I mean, I'll go with those picks. We'll see how the group lines up here.
I think getting that first seed will be just really monumental because I think they would play a third place team. And I think that just that makes it a much easier task. I think because Canada's probably in the deepest pool. Maybe not the best pool per se, but I think, none of those teams that will make it to the groups like the from the two Olympic qualifying tournaments will be slouches per se compared
The
to
first
some.
game on the 27th is the winner of the qualifying tournament in Greece, correct?
I thought it was Australia. I'm pretty sure it's Australia. I could be mistaken, but I
No,
don't
I
don't
think
quote me on it. But I thought
I
I
was
saw.
looking today. I think it's the winner of the qualifying tournament from Greece.
Okay, so that
So
would be a tough, like if it's Luca somehow, like that is always scary. But if it's Greece,
yeah, we got Dylan Brooks, man.
yeah, exactly. Regardless, um,
Luca's worst nightmare.
I think if Canada can make it out of the group at number one, I think I really like their chances to make the semis just because the other pools are a bit more watered down. With South Sudan, who's not terrible, but I think Canada would be cakewalk them, Japan as well, and just some other lower tier teams. So I think that would be a big key, but it's going to be a struggle, man. Like I, that quarterfinal day, and I love Bill Simmons, and I also don't all the time, but he talks about how his favorite day will be that quarterfinals of the Olympics for the men's because you'll have four probably awesome matchups
Hmm.
all played
The
in.
first, the first game for Canada on the 27th is against the winner of the OQT in Greece.
Okay, so you were right. Yeah.
And they got the late game. They start them at 9 o'clock in Paris, local time
Wow.
there.
That's
That's the last game.
yeah. Well, I feel like we've been going for a long enough time. I guess just I think I should end off with Scott. What's your prediction? Because I asked Maddie that this on our last show, and I feel like we should end off with maybe some pessimism, maybe some optimism. How are you? How well and where will Canada finish at the Olympics in men's basketball?
Just because I'm so pessimistic and cynical all the time, this is a gold medal, baby. This
Oh
is,
my
I
God.
think this is it. I think this is a flawed United States team that's old and has too many superstars, and they're getting together too late, and they're not going to form up as a real team. And I think there's a lesson learned against Serbia, and those are our biggest competition. I think we can take everybody else.
Oh my God. You've been around me too much, Scott.
That's right, buddy.
What's happening? What's happening?
Yeah.
I'm on that train too. So I am, if I had to bet money, I'd bet on a gold. I think um I am optimistic and I'm clearly rubbing off you. I'm sure Maddie would be pretty happy if there was a little gold
Yeah.
necklace
I didn't
around.
know we were betting money here, by the way.
We are not betting money. We are not.
Okay. I'm sticking with the
At
gold.
365, we want an ad for this, line it up. I want to take it all. No. But yeah, I think a gold would be pretty cool and would be, as you know, our friend and that we all know, Mike Bartlett, has been talking about that, as this has been the summer of Canada basketball in this country, and I really think it will be. I think probably more so from the men's side, but you never know. And I still think about watching the women's soccer team get that bronze medal in London and how it's kind of elevated them to get that gold medal. And now there's a women's league here. We have a WNBA team. Obviously, the Raptors won. You look at Canada in men's basketball, they should be the second or third favorites almost every Olympics or World Cup the next decade or so with the talent we're producing. And will be a fun ride. And we'll definitely be doing more of these chats throughout the Olympics. And thanks so much, guys, for taking the time, coming on this podcast, and being optimistic all together. So I appreciate you guys doing this, and we'll do this again.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks for having us, Alex.